Hey everybody, it's Anna, and I am here today to bring you my top reads of 2017. I was able to narrow this list down to 32 books. I'm going to get through the first half of the list in this video, and I will save the second half for the next one, just because it's kind of a lot to put it all in one. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. These are my top books in no particular order of the year 2017. Oh, and before we begin, I also should mention that I am going to try my best to include any necessary trigger warnings, both in the video and in the description down below, where you will be able to find a list of all the books that I talked about in this video. All right, so here we go. Without further ado, first book on the list is Her Body and Other Parties by Carmen Maria Machado. This is, I believe, a debut collection, a short story collection about women and queerness and fatness and basically just like all these different kind of experiences that women have as embodied people. This draws a lot from fairy tale retellings, magical realism, conventions of genre fiction. Normally I'm not the hugest fan of magical realism, but I think Machado does it really, really well. This book was so much fun to read. Like, fun maybe isn't even the right word because the subject matter is kind of heavy at times, but it spoke to me in a really deep way. It spoke to me in the way that the author really seems to understand that while it can be painful sometimes to be a woman in the world, to live as a woman in the world, that there is still something special about that you wouldn't give up in order to get rid of the hardships that come with being a woman. So yes, this book does contain some trigger warnings for things like sexual assault, rape, violence against women. So if you are sensitive to those kind of things, just keep that in mind as you decide whether or not you'd like to read this book. Next up is a companion duology, The Black Tides of Heaven and The Red Threads of Fortune, both of these by J.Y. Yang. These are a debut novella collection, duology, I think duology is the right word, that came out this year. These are fantasy books. They take place in kind of a Pan-Asian fantasy universe where nobody chooses their gender until they come of age. So everybody before the certain adult age is referred to using they, them pronouns. They have like a special gender neutral piece of clothing that they all have to wear. And this is the story of Mokoya and Akeha. Each novella takes the point of view of one of the twins. They are twins. They are the children of the protector of the Tenserate. The Tenserate is kind of like this magical land where people can see, it's almost like they can see strings, like from physics and string theory. They can see these strings and threads that bind everything together, and the tensors are the people that are able to manipulate these threads. So these books are about these twins like coming of age, and one of them decides that they do not want to follow their twin in choosing the female gender. They want to choose the male gender, and the twin that decides to choose the female gender is wondering, what do they do when they previously expected that their twin was going to choose the female gender and now has chosen the male gender. I really enjoyed these books. I believe that this is going to be part of a continued series, and I cannot wait to read the rest of them. It's writing from an own voices perspective with regards to gender, as they are a non-binary Asian person. So if you're looking for some own voices reputation, God, Anna. If you are looking for some own voices representation in science fiction and fantasy, this is a great place to start. Okay, next up is, I'm gonna go ahead and call it right now. These were my favorite books of the year, and that is The Name of the Wind and The Wise Man's Fear by Patrick Rothfuss. This is the first two books in an adult fantasy trilogy. The third book has not yet come out. R.I.P. R.I.P. my heart and soul. That follow the story of Quoth, who is a young man from the Edema Rue. They're like a people that is devoted to traveling and performing, singing, bardic poetry. That right ahead, his family dies under mysterious circumstances. They are murdered when he's very young by a mysterious group called the Chandrian, and it is because his father has been, Quoth's father, has been writing a song about the Chandrian and has apparently gotten too close to some uncomfortable truths. I really adore everything about this book, not just because it's my favorite genre like science fiction and fantasy, but because the author has such a nuanced way of writing it. It's unlike any other type of fantasy novel I've ever read, while at the same time managing to hit the same beats that I really enjoy in fantasy novels. I can't really say anything about this series that hasn't already been said because people adore these books. I can see why now. They just like rave about them. There's even been an entire board game, which I have, and I actually found out about because of the books, that they play in the books that has been made into a real board game you can play in the world because of how much people love these books. So definitely recommend. I know that there is also a companion novella that is out that is on my list to read this year, so don't worry about that. I have something to tide me over until the third book comes out. Number 4 is Hunger, a Memoir of My Body by Roxane Gay. This book also comes with a trigger warning. It is a sort of detailed story about how Roxane Gay was gang raped as a very young girl and the sort of fallout as she has tried to deal with that both emotionally and physically throughout her life. Roxane Gay is a self-described like fat black feminist, and in this novel she tackles some very personal, very like painful aspects of her personal history, I would imagine, and her relationship with food and her body, and the relationship between her body and the world at large. I guess I'm sensing kind of a theme about bodies and bodies outside the norm this year. That was not intentional. That kind of just happened, I guess, especially in the latter months of the year. This book was incredible. It was difficult to read. I definitely needed to pace myself a little bit through it, but it was very powerful and very poetic. It dealt with serious issues in a very upfront and honest way without mincing around it, and managed to be very honest and poetic. Would definitely recommend. Up is one of 2 graphic novels that made this list, and that is The Tea Dragon Society by Katie O'Neill. I really love this book. It's super adorable. It's about this young girl, Greta, I believe is her name. Sorry. Yes, it's about this young girl, Greta here. She wants to be a blacksmith, and her quest to do something that is not necessarily a traditional occupation for girls leads her to make friends with this old couple. They are a gay couple, one of whom is disabled, and they raise these little tea dragons, which, let me show you, are so freaking adorable. Let me see. I want to find a really good picture. They're these little creatures, and tea leaves grow from their horns. Tea leaves grow from their horns, and when you drink the tea, made from their horns, you get to experience the memories of the tea dragons. This book was so sweet. And it's a wonderful exploration of friendship and memory, and I just loved it so much. This is a wonderful book for people of all ages. This is a very gifted book for me. I gave this to a lot of friends this year, recommended this to a lot of friends this year. It has just wonderful representation that fits very organically into the rest of the book and the story, and I am hoping that the author decides to continue writing with this series. I know that she is continuing to write and illustrate some more expanded universe things for the Tea Dragon Society, but I'm hoping that we will get another book in the future. On the list is The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden. This is an adult fantasy novel that I believe is going to be part of a trilogy. Definitely a series, because the second book, The Girl in the Tower, is already out, but I'm pretty sure it's a trilogy. And it takes place in kind of a historical fantasy version of Russia. It follows this girl, Vasilia, known as Vasya, who is kind of like she's a misfit among her family because she has magical powers-ish, like she can communicate with different supernatural beings from Russian folklore, but she's also not afraid to use them. There are other characters that also have magical powers, most notably her stepmother, Anna, who was like my same name, but I really didn't like her. I didn't like that she had my name because she was kind of a jerk. So Vazia has magical powers, but she isn't afraid of them. She isn't afraid to use them. She wants the Russian people, like the people, to be able to coexist with these spirits, and it will help keep them happy and safe from the frost. Not the Frost King, the literal embodiment of dangerous winter, who, even though he is cold as ice, just happens to make both mine and Vazia's hearts smolder and burn. Yeah, great book for if you enjoy folk tales, fairy tale retellings, realistic fantasy, I guess, wherein like the world isn't completely fabricated but is very strongly rooted in an existing culture and tradition of our world. And I am very excited to read The Girl in the Tower when it comes out in paperback because, yes, I am one of those people where I want my series to be either all paperback or hardcover. I can't do the mix and match thing. It really bothers me. Next up, speaking of folk and fairy tales, is The Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo. Leigh Bardugo, as you know, is the writer of the Grisha trilogy and the Six of Crows duology, as well as the new Wonder Woman novel. I haven't read that yet. I'm getting to the rest of it. I read all her books this year. I'm in love. So I guess it is kind of a shame to talk about this without first talking about the Grisha trilogy and Six of Crows, but we'll be getting there eventually, so I'm not too worried. The Language of Thorns is a short story collection that takes place within the mythos of the Grishaverse, which is the sort of loosely based on Russian folk and fairy tale universe that Bardugo created for the Grisha trilogy. This has 5 short stories in it. I don't think I have ever managed to ration out a book so slowly as I did this one because I did not want it to end. The book has queer love stories. My baby. It's so beautiful. I love it. It has a really scary, dark retelling of the tale of the Nutcracker, which I also super enjoy, and just is a great addition to your library if you're somebody that enjoys Leigh Bardugo's writing, or even as like a standalone. It stands perfectly well on its own. It's a book I actually do not have with me because it was a public library book, but it was paper, Paging Through History by Mark Kurlansky. I believe this was the only straight up nonfiction book that wasn't a memoir or biography or something like that to make it on the list. And basically it's a book about the history of paper, why humans began to make paper, what it was used for, what it signified culturally, what it signified in terms of technology. And as somebody that loves books, reading paper, etc., this was a really interesting read to me. I actually learned a lot from it. I wasn't expecting to. I kind of thought, grad school has taught me everything I've ever needed to know about the history of publishing, but I actually did learn quite a lot from reading this book, and I would recommend it if you are interested in kind of a cultural history of a very important piece of technology. Up is The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter by Theodora Goss. I think this probably would have been my favorite book of the year had it not been for A Name of the Wind. Oh, and now that I think about it, Six of Crows. Anyway, this book is fabulous, especially if you are a fan of things like the original Frankenstein, Dracula, Gothic novels, and monstrous tales. So this is the story of Mary Jekyll, who is the daughter of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde fame. And when her father dies, she begins to discover something about his sinister dark side as Hyde, but also that there are other women out there that are like her, that have like monstrous secrets and dark pasts and questions about their origins and their lives and the men who created them that they want to answer. So she teams up with, Justine, who is the female monster created by Dr. Frankenstein, Rappaccini's daughter, who is poisonous to the touch. She teams up with the daughter that her father had as Hyde. She is the Jekyll daughter. She teams up with the Hyde daughter and a housekeeper who is just wonderful, and they create like this amazing Victorian monstrous ladies detective agency, and it is just a really fun book. The author I picked up is The Stone Sky by N.K. Jemison. Again, that was a library book, so I do not have it with me, but that was the conclusion to her Broken Earth trilogy, which began with the 5th season, followed up with The Obelisk Gate. The one that I read and enjoyed was The Stone Sky. And I loved this book, but I really think that it has to be taken as part of the trilogy as a whole, because it really is just one continuous story. It's not like Act 1, Act 2, Act 3. It's just a wide expanse. This is the other graphic novel that I have on my list of favorites. This is All's Fair in Middle School by Victoria Jamieson. I read her other graphic novel, Roller Girl, this year, and while that one was good, this one really just took Jamison's skills as a writer and an artist and blew them through the roof. This is about a young girl who lives in Florida. Her name is Imogen, and her parents are Renaissance Fair performers. And Imogen has always grown up around the Renaissance Fair near Orlando that her parents work at. She's always been kind of a geek about it. She can't wait to be more involved in the fair as she gets older. But then she starts going to a real middle school, like a public school. She's been homeschooled up until that point, which homeschool feels. I always like to read books with main characters that were homeschooled, because I was. And she begins to go to the regular middle school that the rest of her peers go to, and she's having some trouble fitting in because they don't really understand the life of the fair and performing and things like her parents and she are more interested in. And it's a wonderful story about having to just navigate the different changes that come with growing up, different social changes, figuring out who you are. I really recommend this book for young and old readers alike. On the list is Uprooted by Naomi Novik. This is an adult fantasy standalone that follows a young girl named Agnieszka who is taken out of her village by the dragon, not an actual dragon. He is a person. His title is the dragon, in order to figure out what is happening with the wood. The wood makes trees scary. I don't know about you, but I was never particularly afraid about the malevolence of moss. But after reading this book, whoo boy, I'm spooked. So this is a really good book again for that sort of Russian, I think this is supposed to be more Polish fairy tale retelling. I have another theme there. We have women's bodies and different bodies, and we have Russian and Polish fairy and folktale retellings. I guess that's just how it happened. Really enjoyed this book. Read it on the plane moving to Seattle, so it definitely kept me company through kind of a very stressful time. Erotic Stories for Punjabi Widows by Bali Jaswal. This book was not what it sounds like. It is an adult novel that takes place in contemporary London about a girl that is beginning to teach English as a second language courses at her local Punjabi community center. But it turns out that the group of women that come to learn English classes just really want to write romantic, erotic smut. And it is a wonderful book for centering questions of women's pleasure and how women write these communities for themselves, write worlds for themselves where their enjoyment is centered. It was a great exploration of intergenerational female friendships, as well as a story about what it means to be an immigrant in a different land than the one you grew up in, and also as a child of immigrants, how to navigate the tensions between an old culture and a new. Is We Are the Ants by We Are the Ants is a story about a boy that decides he is going to allow the world to end. He's being kidnapped by aliens, and the aliens are trying to get him to stop the end of the world. It is literally as simple as he can press a button and he can stop the end of the world. But a bunch of terrible things have been happening to him. His life is just really sad. He doesn't feel that it's worth it to let the world continue on. So the book is about his journey towards figuring out what makes life worth living, what makes the world worth saving, It was really, really good. It definitely made me teary at the end, going to read everything Sean David Hutchinson has ever written now. Is Ramona Blue by Julie Murphy. This is a book about a young bisexual girl that is, again, coming of age. I like these queer coming of age stories. We didn't really have that, certainly not for girls, and none about bisexual girls that I was aware of growing up. This was a really sweet story. It had wonderful queer representation, just about a girl navigating the tensions between growing up from like high school to what lies beyond and experiences with romantic relationships. And now for the big whammy. I put all of these as one because while I did read all of these this year, they're all kind of part of the same universe, and that is the Grisha trilogy and the Six of Crows duology. I could get swole lifting these. Okay, enough of that. I don't really need to say anything more about these books since they are all over BookTube and I was just super late to the party when it came to reading them, but I am so glad I did. Wylan and Jesper are my babes forever, but Nina is me, and Matthias is my book boyfriend. Matthias. My sweet little grumpy snowman child. Last book for this half of the video is Openly Straight by Ben Koningsberg. That was about a boy named Rafe who has decided that he is sick of being the gay kid at his high school, so he decides that he's going to transfer to an elite sort of New England college prep boarding school where he's going to be openly straight instead of openly gay. And basically it isn't because he's ashamed of being gay or because he's being bullied or someone is treating him badly. It's just because he doesn't want that to be the only thing that people think about when they think about him. But as luck would have it, he isn't really able to hide it very well because he starts falling for one of his classmates. This book was really sweet as well. I'm a sucker for like the queer love stories where nobody dies and people can end up being happy and there's nothing like too tragic. We've had enough of that. I just like to read stories about people falling in love. And there is also a companion novel. I don't know if it's meant to be a series, but it's from one of a minor character's perspective, I believe, called Honestly Ben, that I am looking forward to reading in 2018. So that is it for my first half of 2017 favorite books. Comment down below if you had any favorites that you'd like to share or recommend to me. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel so that you will get notified when the next one comes up. That is all for today. I will see you next time. Bye.